The aim of this event this evening is for members of the Fair Renting Campaign and Bristol ACORN members, and also public, to put questions to the mayoral candidates about issues that matter to them. For anyone joining us, you will be able to use the chat function to respond and comment on what has been said. You will also be asked to submit questions to the candidates using the Q&A function. The questions will then be voted on, the most popular being put to the candidates at the end. Please change your settings on chat to all panelist attendees to do this. May I remind everyone that disagreement with views is fine, but everyone must be polite and respectful. Offensive or abusive comments will not be tolerated. Chat moderators will post a reminder of the rules if necessary, but anyone found to be breaking these rules will be removed. I will now pass over to members of the Fair Renting Campaign and ACORN Bristol members to introduce themselves.
Thank you. There are 134,000 people renting privately in Bristol. We are a large and diverse community made up of key workers, communities of colour, young people, those on low incomes, benefits recipients, teachers, students, artists and families. We make up almost 1/3 of the population of the city, but we are being overlooked. Building affordable housing has been a major focus of the mayoral campaign. However, this alone will not address the needs of the thousands of renters in our city impacted by a renting system that is unaffordable, inaccessible, unstable, and unsafe. We have launched the Bristol Fair Renting Manifesto to demand urgent changes that are needed now. In just 2 weeks, almost 1,000 Bristolians have signed this manifesto. Tonight, we are calling on the mayoral candidates to recognise that the private renting system in Bristol is broken and to commit to taking direct action to fix it. What will you do to address this crisis?
Thank you very much. And now I'll hand over to the ACORN Bristol representative.
Hi everyone, my name's Rose. I've been an ACORN member for just over a bit now, just over a year now. ACORN was founded in Bristol in 2014. We are a mass membership organisation and network of low-income people organising for a fairer deal in our communities. We've grown from just a handful of people in Easton 7 years ago to a nationwide organisation with nearly 6,000 members, with branches and groups in over 20 locations across the country. We are a community union that uses creative and direct action to tackle issues that affect our members, whether it's fighting to take back public control of local bus networks, ending discrimination against those on housing benefits by major high street banks, or protecting members from illegal eviction. We use our strength in numbers to win and protect our members. We know that the economic and political setup of the country is stacked against working class people, and that's why we've come together to challenge the system through collective action. We are building an organisation based on solidarity and firm belief that everyone deserves the right to a dignified life and to safe housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now introduce our 4 mayoral candidates. We have Marvin Rees from Labour, Sandy Hoare Ruthven for the Green Party, Alistair Watson for the Conservative Party, and Nicholas Coombs, who has very kindly stood in for the Lib Dem mayoral candidate, Caroline Gooch. I will now hand over to the Fair Rent Campaign for question number 1.
Hi, I'm Benoit. I work in the creative sector in Bristol. I've seen many of my friends and contemporaries driven out of the city or forced to drop their creative practice because of financial hardship, of which rent is a large part. The impact on the city, which prides itself on its creativity, is undeniable. Growing numbers can't afford to live in Bristol, and high and rising rents have wider economic consequences and risks. Many renters are key workers, so what will the social and economic impact be if they're forced to leave too? Bristol rents are out of control. Since 2011, private rents have increased by almost twice as much as incomes, and renters are on the lower end of that income range where stagnation has been worse. Unaffordable private rents, driving inequality and social segregation, and disproportionately impact Black and BAME communities who are overrepresented in the private renting system, and many who are struggling to make ends meet are at growing risk of homelessness. We need local rents to be stabilised so that all, not just some of our communities, are able to live in Bristol. In light of all that, do you acknowledge that private rents are out of control in Bristol, and will you make a commitment to lobby the national government for the powers you need to locally control rents?
And now the first candidate to answer is Sandy.
Good, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone, and thanks for inviting us all. And it's good to be here. So the quick and short answer is yes. However, I'd sort of expand a bit on that. So in my day job, I'm the Chief Executive of the Creative Youth Network. We're a large youth organisation. So I see every day that the difficulties that young people have getting on even the rented housing level ladder. You know, the issues of high rent at sort of best, it's starting to push communities out of their areas, but at worst, it's pushing people into sofa surfing or ultimately homelessness. So yes, I absolutely would lobby central government to help us control rent, but ultimately what this is about is the need to build more homes for people in our city. It's fundamentally around supply and demand, and particularly affordable homes. And I think we've made the mistake of trying to rely on the private sector to build more affordable homes. We haven't achieved that. So instead, we need to invest in council housing. So that's why I've committed to build 2,000 new council homes. We could build more, but only if the government gives us more money. And that, for me, is the long-term sustainable solution rather than just lobbying for rent controls. But I think that's an interim measure.
Thank you. Next up to answer is Marvin Rees.
Yeah, thank you. So we have been both as the collection of core cities at the 10 biggest cities outside of London, and with the Metro Mayors, with Sadiq and Andy from Manchester as well. So this has been a long-running battle we've had with government, that and many other battles we're having them to make sure that we've got the powers we need to safeguard people's lives and build the kind of inclusive cities we want. But obviously, government has a little bit of a 10-year. I will say too that we've tried to set an example. We have written to private landlords in the city, but in line with that, we set our own example. The rents we do control, we have frozen this year while we get ready to write a 30-year HRA business plan next year that will lay out the delivery of council housing over the next 30 years. As well. And I will say an idea we did just take from a meeting with ACORN the other day. We are going to work out what it means to be a living rent city. We talked about having a clear criteria, just like around a living wage city, but we want to work up what that criteria is, take that to core cities and the Metro Mayors, and set a standard that all cities can work towards around a living rent. But you know, I mean, we know that housing is the single most significant policy tool we have, both for population health, and it will determine the price the planet pays for us meeting the needs of a growing population. The city's going to grow by about 100,000 people over the next 25 years. So delivering homes, delivering affordable homes at the centre of our policy platform.
Thank you. Next is Alistair.
I mean, I acknowledge that rents in Bristol are much higher than perhaps we would like, or that we would see in the rest of the country apart from central London. And I mean, some of it's, you know, because of the success of our city, we are drawing people in, we are growing as a city, we will keep on growing for the foreseeable future. So we do have pressure on our housing stock, and that's driving up the costs of houses and the costs of land. And this will always be reflected in rents. You know, I think, I mean, that there are poor landlords out there. There are landlords that don't do the right thing, that rent out appalling properties and don't do the safety stuff that should be done. There's all that, but there's an awful lot of landlords who are not making a lot of money because that, you know, having to buy properties at a certain price, you have to get a certain rent to be able to make any return. I'm very much against rent controls in any form, because I think what it'll do is it'll take properties off the market. It'll actually mean fewer rented properties available, and that would not be a good way to go. So what we've got to do, and you know, I think the other speakers have said the same. We've got to increase the stock. We've got to get more homes, houses, flats, apartments built in Bristol, and I think part of that mix, as the other candidates I think will say, is that should be council housing, social housing, housing associations getting involved, because then there is some control over the rents on those, and they can be rented out at a better price. I think private landlords, we just have to increase the amount of stock, and hopefully those rents will then reach a better level in the future. It is a difficult situation, particularly for young people, particularly for people trying to get on the housing ladder and trying to save for their first deposit. You know, I realise all that, and I think central government is trying to help in certain ways as well. But it's not an easy economic situation.
Thank you very much, Alistair. Sorry to cut you short.
That's fine.
The next candidate is Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the organisers for putting on this hustings. It's a really good opportunity to scrutinise candidates for office and to give a bit of accountability to local politicians. So to the question, high rents are of course a very bad thing, because it prices people out of the city. It means that we're not able to get the diversity of residents that the city is famous for, that we don't have the types of creative industries that you've spoken about, which are often poorly paid, and indeed the very useful key workers who are definitely very poorly paid, but are incredibly important to our city and our way of life. It's a supply and demand thing. It is that there is a high demand for Bristol. We have a city that I love to live in, and many other people do. People are moving to Bristol. There aren't enough physical buildings to go around. The prices go up. That means that some people who can't afford to live in the centre have to live further out. So to fix that thing, I don't think we should suppress demand. I certainly want people to be able to continue to move into Bristol. So we have to fix the supply. And as everyone said, that means building more houses. So the council is responsible for setting planning policy. We can designate more sites for housing land and set density policies that can increase the number of dwellings that can be built on a given site. But city land is fairly scarce, so within Bristol city limits, we've got to collaborate with the neighbouring authorities, South Gloucestershire, North Somerset. And to be honest, the relationship with those has not been great in recent years. That could certainly be improved through working through the West of England authorities. And when we do build new communities, they must be balanced in terms of tenure and people coming into them, and also sustainable in environmental and social sustainability. So the additional supply then means that it's not possible to charge such high rents because people have got other choices. But the council can also intervene directly, build their own social housing and set social rents appropriately. And I think we'll talk about that later on in the agenda. And I will say finally that the last Liberal Democrat administration built more housing than the two mayors since then.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. We'll just go back to Benoit, the original questioner, and his response.
Hi, I'm glad to hear you all think it's right. Glad to see you think it's all a serious issue. I personally am very unconvinced by this supply and demand thing. The housing market is a bubble that is growing and growing. It's the main way people invest money in this country, and providing more provides more empty properties for people who want to land bank essentially. I think Marvin mentioned the private rent, the rent in council properties which have been frozen, but there are so few council properties that it's almost irrelevant in my opinion. The building more is important, but it's a very long-term game. There are many people whose lives are being ruined right now by the fact that they can't afford their rent. They're having to leave the city, they're having to leave whole area.
Thank you. We now go to Devon, who has the next question on behalf of the Fair Renting campaign.
Thank you. So across the city, renters are paying high rents for a poor service. Disrepair and poor, unsafe conditions are a common issue, and requests for repairs often go unheard. We are unable to challenge this inaction because we are at risk of rent increases and retaliatory evictions. A Section 21 eviction caused the breakup of my family, as each of us had to live with different friends in order to stay in the city and allow me and my sister to finish our GCSEs and A-levels. By lobbying national government to scrap this legislation and introduce a robust renters reform bill, people will be safeguarded when challenging the behaviour of landlords and letting agents. Renters have a right to live in decent and safe homes. So we also need stricter enforcement from the council to ensure that those renting out properties are held to account. What will you do to tackle poor conditions in private rented households more proactively? And will you lobby national government to permanently protect renters from retaliatory evictions by scrapping Section 21?
Thank you. First response from Alistair, please.
I don't know Section 21 in detail. Let me admit that first off. So I can't really make any comment on that. I think the issue of poor standard housing and rogue landlords is a big one. And I think there should be more and better licensing of landlords, particularly in houses of multiple occupancy. I think one of the issues the council has is capacity and enforcement. It is, we need to put quite a bit of money into that to enforce the standards as well as we should be doing. That's not to say that we shouldn't do it. It's just there is only a certain amount of money that we have in the council to do things, and it's being called on by an awful lot of different groups and different people. I'd certainly like to see better standards. I'd like to see any sorts of rogue landlords who are doing things that are illegal prosecuted properly and taken to the cleaners. But there is the other aspect of this, in which landlords also have poor tenants at times, and some of them don't pay their rent, some of them maybe do damage to the property and so on. And there has to be some way that they can get their properties back, because they can have financial hardship as well, on the other hand. So, there's two sides to this, I think we have to be equitable in both sides.
Thank you very much. The same question to Nicholas, please.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing that story, Devon. That's horrific that a family can be split up through a no-fault eviction like that. The Liberal Democrats have been campaigning to ban these no-fault evictions, to prevent landlords from simply turfing their tenants out. If they've, for example, complained about something, it should be unlawful to then cancel that tenancy. When you sign up to rent somewhere, you sign a contract. You say, I'm going to live here for a year, and you expect that to be honoured. You don't expect the landlord to change their minds halfway through because they don't like you. So yes, that should be unlawful. Now, we think that there should be a new national regulator for major commercial landlords, so those with more than 25 properties. So they should be subject to regular inspections, with the opportunity to enforce against poor quality there. And we do need to strengthen landlord licensing in Bristol as well. So there are some things you can do national level, others at the local level. And Alistair's right that if you want to do enforcement, then you've got to pay for that. And as a council, you've just got to make those choices, because actually an investment in enforcement is about ensuring that people have decent homes to live in, and good quality homes prevent greater problems down the line. It can stop health problems, or indeed issues of homelessness that cost a lot more to fix after the problem has been caused. So an investment in inspections, in monitoring and enforcement against poor quality housing is a real investment in the people that live in them, and it will save the council money in the long run if they're not having to deal with the problems that's caused by that poor quality housing.
Thank you, Nicholas. Same question to Marvin Rees, please.
Thanks. So one of the challenges, the overarching challenge I think we face, is that the world of housing has moved beyond the legislation that has been there to surround it and moved on at a pace. So with the number of people moving into the private rental sector, with people fearing for their financial futures and therefore chasing after properties to secure up their financial future, and other people just amassing wealth through properties, you know, that whole world has moved on, and the legislation needs to catch up to protect us and to safeguard our well-being in the face of that. I mean, in terms of national legislation, we're in a constant battle with government all the time, as a collection of core cities and beyond, saying that we need government to put the legislation in place that allows us to lead our cities in the way that we need to lead, whether it be around issues of climate change, inclusive economic development, infrastructure delivery, but certainly in the housing market. And again, the points we make is around Section 21, is around rental standards. Again, they did listen to us on evictions during COVID as well, when they extended it, is to make sure that we can protect our population. I mean, a couple of things I'll say. We did, if I take these in chronological order, it didn't take us too long. In September 2016, we signed the ACORN Ethical Lettings Charter, famously Paul with his T-shirt in the chamber and so forth. That formed the basis of moving into our licensing scheme. The first that we've had across the private sector. We're consulting right now about extending that scheme into Brislington, West, Bedminster and Hallfield as we move it across the whole city. Prosecutions is a challenge. We have had prosecutions in the city, and we're pleased about that. And I want to see people, but austerity doesn't just mean losing frontline services, it's the backroom capacity. And there are, whether we're campaigning for libraries, parks, toilets, it's the same revenue part that pays for the enforcement team. So there is a challenge for us, but we're beefing up that prosecution as well as we can make more financial space for it.
Thank you very much. And now to Sandy.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, look, I'm going to echo Marvin's point that the austerity is what has restricted the local authorities' ability to enforce this sort of thing. So to make sure that repairs are done on time, you know, the licensing scheme that we have in Bristol is a good one, but we need to roll it out across the city, make sure that HMOs are covered. And make sure that then there is the capacity, and this is where austerity comes in, to follow those things up. That's the key. But you know, I'd also, I mean, I echo Marvin's point as well. You know, owning a second home to let out has now become standard practice to secure your pension, and that's the structural system that we have to get our way out of. If you look at the European model, you know, people, if you rent a home, it's your home until you want to move out of it, right? That's where we should aim for. The rents can't go up more than inflation and have to be agreed with the landlord. That's where we want to get through to with rented accommodation. But in the meantime, we will lobby hard, pushing against austerity. That's the really big one. But in the meantime, that licensing scheme that already exists in Bristol is something that we need to push, roll out and really enforce.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go back to Devon for her response.
Yes, so thank you everyone. Thank you for, I know that you all mentioned you all brought up the importance of licensing, and Nicholas, you recognise the importance of investing in enforcement, yes, and you're committing to prioritise the enforcement of the private rented sector. I think that's great. I would have liked to see more solid commitments from the candidates to agree to lobby national government to scrap Section 21 no-fault evictions. And although you acknowledged poor conditions and lack of protections for renters, this is not just an issue for national government. Bristol Council do have the power to ensure renters' homes are safe and that people are not at risk of losing their homes for challenging poor conditions. And we look forward to taking this further with whoever is elected. Yes.
Thank you, Devon. We will now go to Kate from the Fair Renters Union for question number 3.
Sorry, Kate, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, question 3. Many people are locked out of private renting in Bristol due to discrimination. I once had to move into temporary accommodation because there wasn't a single room advertised in Bristol that didn't exclude me, either for being over 35 or for being in receipt of benefits. Courts in the UK have ruled that benefits discrimination is unlawful, but it is still widespread across Bristol. Landlords and letting agents are refusing to rent to certain groups, including people in receipt of benefits and those on lower incomes. This is disproportionately impacting Black and minority ethnic communities, single parents, and the disabled, among others. Only certain types of people meeting limited economic criteria are being allowed to access private renting in the city. These discriminatory practices are driven by prejudice, and they need to be exposed and stopped. Will you commit to taking a zero tolerance approach to discrimination by making this a formal remit of the council's rogue landlord and letting agent unit? And what will you do to stamp out unlawful practices such as income and benefits discrimination?
Thank you, Kate. First to answer this time is Marvin.
Yeah, we're going to take we're using all the powers available to us with available resources, and I know that's not necessarily a nice word, but it does go back to the fact that we've been hit incredibly hard, and the capacity to to meet our needs has been undermined over for a period of 10 years now. But because we've put some housing at the centre of our approach to the city, particularly on our drive to get a healthier, more inclusive city, yeah, we will absolutely target that, because it is about discriminating against some of the most vulnerable people in Bristol. One of the things that we are going to do with our Homes Board, that dare I say ACORN's a member of now, this is one of the priorities for the Homes Board. It has representatives of social landlords, private agents and renters, alongside obviously ourselves and campaign groups as well, and making this a city standard. So it's us pushing it, us using our enforcement power, but having a city standard to push through. I'll just mention another form of discrimination, because you touched on it as well, and it echoes in that we held the city's first ever race and housing conference just a few months ago. We did this with BSWN and SARI, looking at some of the specific issues around race, and we know that housing has been both a product and a driver of race inequality and segregation within Bristol as well. And again, many of the issues, and we've got 2 minutes to answer, but many of the issues you raised were coming up through that, through the conference as well. And obviously we hosted the conference with ASHA and are committed to take action on all those fronts with the organisations participating in the conference. So inequality, exclusion, discrimination, this is our meat and potatoes, is what we're about, and welcome a chance to work with you to tackle them.
Thank you very much, Marvin. Next to answer, please, is Alistair.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is really awful to hear that this happens, and I know it does. I mean, if we could, there should be zero tolerance on this matter, but I'm not exactly certain of all the legal implications. So I can't really answer exactly what we could do. Obviously, that there are capacity issues within the council as well to do it. But I think, and when I had quite a long session with ACORN just recently, one of the things I want to do is to put together a proper plan when I get into office. It is easier for Marvin to talk about the things he's doing, because he's already had 5 years of knowing what's going on and working with these groups. I wouldn't have had that by the time I get into office. So I need to get together with all the groups and all the different parties and put together a proper plan and to look at what we can do in some of these areas. And this would certainly be an area we need to look at and to decide how we can take it forward. But I would certainly like to see a zero tolerance policy against any forms of discrimination, whatever they may be.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And to you now, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, we would take a zero tolerance approach to it. And look, again, in my day job as Chief Executive Creative Youth Network, we are often fighting for young people to get the housing that they deserve. And we see this all the time. You know, young people are restricted and looking for homes, and it takes longer because some people are just, you know, for no good reason and a number of bad reasons are not allowing young people to rent their homes. So absolutely to take a zero tolerance approach. But look, also organisations like yours, like ACORN, are really key to this. You self-organising and proving to landlords that they can't get away with this stuff is really, really important. And I'm a great believer in community organising and groups of people getting together to fight this. I think that is really key. And I would come on to the third point, that actually I do think supply is an important part of this. When there is more supply of both private and council homes, then people have an alternative, and that brings those at the bottom of the scale, those who are prejudiced, those who aren't good landlords, they won't be able to rent their homes out if they don't conform to better standards, that they don't, you know, that they're not prejudiced, that they're repairing on time. If people have an alternative, particularly a council alternative, then I think that is a really important thing to do. So we have to look at the long term as well as the immediate term, because otherwise we're going to be having the same conversation in 10 years' time as we're having now. And you know, I would challenge Marvin on the rent freeze for council tenants. That does mean that the number of council houses that can be built has gone from, in his own paper, 870 in the next 5 years down to about 560. So that has an immediate impact on the number of people who are going to be able to access council homes, and that comes from his own paper. So this is really important, especially when private rent is often 2-3 times that of council rent. A small rise for council tenants means that we should be able to build more council homes, and that's a really key thing for the long term.
Thank you very much. And now on to Nicholas.
Thank you. And I think that Sandy is right to get to the cause of this. Obviously, discrimination is against the law. Kate told us that, and I think it was obvious to start with. But why is discrimination even possible? It's because of that power imbalance, because the landlords have the power, because they have the limited number of homes, and because renters are competing with each other to get those homes. And to tackle that power imbalance so that it's not, so that discrimination doesn't have such a negative impact, it's got to increase the number of homes being built, clearly. Also, why is it that landlords think that those on benefits are going to make bad tenants? Are they worried that they're not able to pay? So there may well be an issue that housing benefit, for example, is on a national rate, and sometimes it doesn't cover the rates of rent, especially in a place like Bristol. And so one of the things that the Liberal Democrats want to do is to localise housing benefit rates so that it can cover an appropriate sum for the area that one is trying to rent in. So I think that's the issue, that discrimination is illegal, but behind it, you've got to make sure that there are more homes, so there's more choice, and the landlords have less power, and give more funding to housing benefits so that they're a more desirable tenant to have.
Thank you. And we'll just go back to Kate now from the Fair Rent campaign for her response.
Thank you everyone for your responses. Really great to hear that across the board, zero tolerance is what you're looking for, but we are looking for a stronger remit. We're looking for a commitment that the rogue landlord and letting agent unit will take a zero tolerance approach with any rogue landlords who are acting prejudicially or unlawfully. Sandy made a point about payment, but all renters have an obligation to pay for their property, whether they receive housing benefit or not. Landlords and letting agents are making blanket judgments and refusing to rent to people purely based on the fact that they receive benefits. I had a good references and a 15-year history of paying in full and on time, but I was discriminated against because I was on benefits. Straightforward. To give you an idea of the impact, benefits discrimination is a potential issue for around 45,000 people who rent in our city. We at the Bristol Fair Renting campaign are looking forward to working with whoever wins the election to see rents lowered, conditions improved, and discrimination ended for renters across the city.
Thank you very much, Kate. And now we will go on to question number 4 from Rachel, who is presenting on behalf of ACORN Bristol.
Thank you, Samantha. Hi, everyone. Homelessness is a serious and urgent issue in Bristol. Perhaps the most shameful form of homelessness is the city's rough sleeping population of just shy of 150 people. Bristol City Council has piloted a housing first approach to rough sleeping in the city. This entails moving away from staircase model, where to qualify for a home, individuals first have to control issues such as addiction, petty crime and mental illness. The housing first approach saves money on police, prison stays, shelters and healthcare because it gives people a place of long-term safety to work on these issues. Now that the council has piloted the housing first approach, will candidates commit to rolling it out as a first step in tackling the issue of rough sleeping in the city by 2024?
Thank you. And first to answer is Nicholas, please.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is that homelessness should not be a crime. And unfortunately it is under the Vagrancy Act of 1824. The Vagrancy Act should be repealed. The Liberal Democrats are seeking to do that. The Conservative government has promised to do so this year, but haven't actually put in any plans to make that happen. So at a council level, what we can do is stop using it. So I would suggest to Mayor Rees that he instruct his officers to stop using the Vagrancy Act to prosecute homeless people in the city. Housing supply is part of the solution to homelessness, but also we've got many rough sleepers have got issues with complex mental and physical health needs, and they also need to be addressed so that the rough sleepers can take the homes that they're offered and stay in them, and know that those are safe places for them to live in. So we would invest in public health programs, especially related to reducing drug and alcohol consumption, as a medical intervention rather than a legal one. Related to that, of course, we would support drug consumption rooms to reduce deaths on the streets related to that. And I think another thing that the Liberal Democrats stand out for is seeking to legalise cannabis, for example. It's one of the examples of trying to take something from the criminals, make it safe and legal, so that it's not feeding this cycle of crime that can end up with homelessness and addiction. So in conclusion, it's not just about housing, it's also about treating the long-term health needs.
Thank you. And now to you, Marvin.
If I can just steal a bit of time to make a couple of points to start. I mean, I can just say that our focus as an administration on housing, and not just on delivery, but managing the existing housing situation, I think was evidence. It was the first political appointment I made, Paul Smith, and the point I made to Paul was your job's to get houses built and tackle the private rental sector. Just focus on there, and we've left nothing on the field of play with that focused political leadership. The first time cabinet members had that level of focus around housing. Secondly, I would say I think rough sleeping is a crime, but also I think we've had a real focus in the city over the last few years as well on families in temporary accommodation as well, which is another complex area where lives are being uprooted. But I mean we have focused on rough sleeping with with the additional government money, we've managed to get rough sleeping down 80%. It may not feel like that, but that's where we're at. We opened the first 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week homelessness shelter in St Anne's, supported 1,200 people into accommodation. We retained our council tax reduction scheme. We've retained it again, even in the face of COVID, all the pressure, because we know the financial pressures families are coming under. And we kept our emergency payments going, which supported 700 families to stay in homes as well. So as Joe Biden said, don't tell me what you believe, show me your budget. And the budget we've put in place has been one to try and support people who are being crushed, left behind by the economy, but certainly through COVID in as well. And in our pledges that we have now going forward, it is to continue to reduce the number of people in temporary accommodation, but to halve, and then ultimately with the city plan, the city approach, to eliminate rough sleeping. It is worth talking about the one city approach, because it is about what the resources we have. But we went through a series of sessions last year where we tried to get much better coordination amongst the many organisations working with rough sleepers in the city as well. Because the truth be told, we don't always get more than the sum of our parts, because sometimes it's not very nice, but there is competition and friction between some of the organisations working with rough sleepers in the city. So we had a series of sessions in City Hall looking at everything from life complex needs, mental health, addictions, family breakdown, family reconciliation, bricks and mortar, modern methods of construction. If you look at the Z pods up in St George's Park, we did with the Bristol Housing Festival, YMCA for young people at risk of homelessness. We don't charge council tax to care leavers anymore, again, because they would fall into financial difficulty and disproportionately vulnerable to ended up on our streets. So we've been putting real resource into trying to deal with rough sleeping on the streets, but eliminating the circumstances that lead people to living on the streets.
Thank you very much. And next to Sandy.
Good, thank you. So somebody's mentioned Finland in the chat, and that is the gold standard. So I completely agree that housing first is the key thing. It's the place where you can start to rebuild your life again. And again, in my day job, I remember supporting a young person. We found a house, but then it's just sometimes simple things like money management. When you get your first paycheck, don't blow it all at once. Personal hygiene. That family reconciliation, mental health, and those sorts of things. So actually, for me, there has to be that long-term support once you get housing first. And yes, I would look to scrap the staircase model across the city and roll out a housing first model. But also, for me, prevention is a key thing that we need to invest in. So how do we prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place, street homeless? So the idea of no second night out, but even before that, care leavers are disproportionately represented in street homelessness. So having those relationships with people we know are vulnerable through mental health services, drug services, that kind of thing, actually to prevent them becoming homeless in the first place is the most important thing that we can do. So I would really look to put more resource into prevention as well as the housing first model.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And now to Alistair.
I think most of the arguments have been made. I'm very taken with a housing first model. I think the evidence seems to be that's the better way to go than trying to get people off drugs and get their mental health sorted before they go, and that seems about face. There's a cost implication, of course, and quite a bit of money was given by central government during the pandemic. We've got to keep funds coming forward for this. I think it's important, very important for the city. And I think in the end, it will save us money, because if we can get people off the streets, then all that sort of cost of enforcing policing and taking people to court and all the rest of it can be eliminated. So, I'm very taken with that. I think it's a way, I haven't seen all the budgets yet, but I mean, it would certainly be something that I think would be a priority for funding going forward.
Thank you very much. And now we will return to Rachel from ACORN for her response.
You're muted there, Rachel.
Mute, Rachel.
Sorry, technology, hey. So yeah, thank you for that, Nicholas. Yeah, I think scrapping the Vagrancy Act, I think, is a really good step forward. Marvin, not sure about the 80%, but a lot of homeless people don't want to go into shelters because they're very vulnerable, and there's lots of, there can be drugs within the shelters. So I've spoken to quite a few homeless people. Sandy, yeah, I liked your response to that, and obviously scrapping the staircase would be brilliant. And Alistair, yeah, money. Unfortunately, it boils down to money, but it's got to be done. It's a very important issue, and it needs, the longer that it goes on, the more people die on the streets. This is an urgent issue. So thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we go to ACORN, to Suzanne, for question number 5.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Hope you can all hear me okay. Okay, so this is based on ACORN's pledge number 2. The pledge is that we want candidates to commit to 1,000 council homes a year by 2025. We members have noted that when you're looking to apply for council housing, Bristol's own council website states it's very unlikely that you'll be offered a council property because the waiting list is very long. Even people with the greatest need often wait several years before they get a council property. I've got personal experience of being left to kind of what felt like to rot on the waiting list with 2 little children as a lone parent. So that's something close to my heart. Obviously, it's totally unacceptable, and it puts families under and individuals under a great deal of strain, and no one should have to wait years for a council house. So ACORN members believe that to get anywhere near solving the housing crisis in this city, which all the candidates have to some extent acknowledged so far, we need to increase the stock of council homes in the city by 1,000 a year. So we're under no illusion that that's a big demand, but it's the only thing that's really going to meet the needs that the city has. And I just want to remind the candidates that they've all talked about the need for council housing to solve other problems in the city of homelessness and of high rents. So, and I want to make it really clear that the question is about council homes and not affordable homes. So please don't talk about affordable housing. Please answer the question about council homes, okay? So please can candidates lay out precisely how many additional council homes that they will have created by the end of their term as mayor, and if this is less than 1,000 per year on average, will they acknowledge that it is not sufficient to tackle the housing crisis we're facing? Thank you, that's my question.
Didn't catch that.
Sorry. Next on the list to answer this question first is Sandy. Apologies.
Good, thank you. So look, your analysis is right that we need more council homes. There are 13,000 people on the council house waiting list, so we absolutely need more council homes. That's why I've committed to build 2,000 over the next 9 years. But we need to remember that we're recovering from a generation of underinvestment, right? So we haven't built commercial homes, we haven't built council homes, even affordable homes. And things like the right to buy is taking about 150 homes, council homes a year off the list. So we're not even keeping up with the amount of council housing that we have. The Conservative government has not allowed councils to borrow in order to build council homes. Now we are allowed to borrow. So that is why I've looked through in detail what this council can afford, and it is 2,000 homes based on the existing council assets that it can borrow against. This is based on Paul Smith's figures. So Marvin's housing czar, who has now disappeared, and who Marvin has rejected that proposal by not raising council rents. So this is the maximum that we can build. I would love to build more. If central government would give us more money, we can build more, but I have to be realistic. I can't make the council go bust. So 2,000 homes is the maximum that we can build. And alongside that, we want to insulate all of the existing council homes in order to reduce fuel bills and obviously reduce our emissions too.
Thank you very much. And next, please, Alistair.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many we can build until I get into office and I can talk to the officers there, work out what the budgets are. I want to build as many as we can. I also think that although you say it's got to be council homes, I think housing associations can be put into the mix on this because that's social housing as well. And I think some of them are very well run. And of course—
Sorry, Alistair, can I just draw you back to the point? The question is surrounding council housing only. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, let me just say we are committed to wanting to do it. We want to build some council homes. We want to look at the different types of tenures, you know, maybe, you know, shared ownership as things move forward. I think taking away any sort of way to and a right to buy, I think that would be probably the wrong thing. I think people need to aspire and be able to get a stake in their own property as they live in it over time. But of course, you know, what we haven't done is replace that stock well enough and I agree that, you know, and I think that the Conservative government had the wrong policies on that. We are now trying to reverse those policies and to look at better ways to build these homes.
Thank you very much. And now to Nicholas. Thank you.
Thanks. I think there are two aspects to a solution. One is about getting more effective at delivery, and the other is looking at where the money can come from. Otherwise, we are limited to existing funds. In terms of effective delivery, we've had a few failures in recent years with, say, the Cumberland Basin, where it's gone out without involving local people, had to U-turn. I think Brislington Meadows U-turn today, and also the arena site has been a difficult one to follow. So the council's got to get better at doing what it does, but it's also got to pull in money to allow us to expand beyond the envelope of what can currently be afforded. So borrowing against the council housing stock is something that the Liberal Democrats put in to law in the last coalition government. So these asks of national government are possible. One of the other asks that we would have is to retain the right to buy receipts, so that instead, when a council house is sold, currently the money goes to the Treasury in London. We think that it should be retained by the council that the house was bought from, so that they can build a new house with the money. We'd also like to do a couple of interventions about land purchase that give councils the first choice to buy land which is sold by the public sector. So if the MOD is clearing out a site, give the council the right to bid first to put council houses on it. And the Lib Dems also think there should be a national body to compulsorily acquire land at its base price rather than its inflated price when it gets planning permission, which would be a way of breaking into that unaffordability cycle so that it becomes easier and more affordable for local authorities to build houses that are needed. We've also got to coordinate with local government and with the region. So getting funding through the West of England Homes Communities Agency is something that we've got to step up with. We've got to become more collaborative as an authority and work with neighbouring bodies to get those funds in so that we can build the houses that we need.
Are you able to answer the question on how many council houses the Lib Dems would build?
No, in this one you're sounding like my finance colleague at work. They want me to project something 5 years in advance with several variables that I can't answer. So I can't make a pledge. We've been burnt on that one, but I can tell you how we might go about it.
The details are there. You can know exactly how much you can borrow and how many you can build.
But you don't know how effective delivery is going to be and whether you're going to get planning permission and whether there'll be any issues on the site that will mean that you won't be able to build out to the maximum density.
Sorry, gentlemen. Sorry to interrupt. Can we go to Marvin Rees now, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So in the housing revenue account, which is where we take the money for building homes, at the moment we've got 1,000 council homes by 2025 lined up, and that's a mix. Two sources for those council homes. One is new builds, and the other is buying back under Section 106 from homes that are built. So it's just over 1,000. So that's the rate of delivery. As I said, I think getting to 1,000 homes, council homes a year, is not possible unless some drastic things happen. There are two other really important variables beyond our finance that count. One is land and the availability of land. And land is difficult, right? Some land can be very complicated to bring forward different conditions. It's not on great supply routes, in access and exit. Can we buy it? And that's where we need action from groups like Homes England that make land viable. And also, and there has been some political gaming about this, whenever you point to a piece of land to build homes on it, sometimes you get local objections and that draws out. So when we brought Hengrove Park through, I won't say which party, but it was objected to. There was a local campaign against the largest council house building program in centuries, and then it was called in. That delayed that scheme by quite a period of time. The other is capacity within the local authority, and I've shared austerity doesn't just mean that you lose money for public toilets and parks and crossings. It means our legal firepower, our planners, all those people that bring land forward for development are really stretched. I'm stretching them all the time in terms of what they can get done. So austerity has really undermined local authorities' ability to deliver on housing. Dare I just say, as it was mentioned, a lot of the legal and planning firepower in Bristol City Council was tied up in the arena. It was taking up all that time. We've changed that. Let the arena be delivered at the risk of the private sector. We'll focus that planning and legal firepower actually on getting homes built for people and actually build homes on Temple Island as well.
Thank you, Marvin. And now we'll go back to Suzanne for her response.
Thanks, Samantha, and thanks to all the candidates. I mean, I've put it in the chat already, but honestly, guys, I'm not impressed because you all said, I think most of you said that you wouldn't do rent control or you weren't going to do much for rent control because the solution was to build council houses. And then we find out, oh, actually, you don't really have a serious plan to build council houses. It's massively hypocritical and contradictory, I'm afraid. I do appreciate that at least Sandy and Marvin have actually bothered to go and do some sums. Nicholas and Alistair appear to have skipped maths for today. So
Suzanne, you're muted again.
Yeah,
I think just muted. Yeah, sorry. So I was looking, and I think Sandy 2009 years and Marvin's 1,004 years, when there's 13,000 people on the waiting list, is obviously just, well, it's not going to help house those people now, and it's not going to do anything for private renters either, because that's going to have absolutely no impact on private renting and how high they are, so and how high their rents are. So that's very disappointing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And now we go to ACORN for question number 6, which is going to be asked by Arif.
Thank you, Samantha. We're in a climate emergency, and thankfully, Bristol City Council agrees. With 14% of all UK carbon emissions coming from homes, making our houses more energy efficient is vital for reducing our impact on climate change. An extremely cost-effective way to reduce emissions is to retrofit homes, which creates high-skilled jobs, reduces fuel poverty, and makes homes more comfortable and secure to live in. In July 2019, Marvin Rees pledged to retrofit 7,000 homes per year. It's not clear whether this target has been met. However, given the council's own deadline to be carbon neutral by 2030, this ambition must be drastically stepped up. So will the candidates please respond as precisely as possible to the following? How many and which homes will you target for retrofitting before the end of the term as mayor? How will training in retrofitting be rolled out? And will you commit to release figures for completed retrofits to the public every 6 months? Thank you.
Thank you. And first to answer, please, can we have Alistair?
Right, yeah, and your final point first. I mean, you know, I think that councils need to be very transparent in all they do. It has been very difficult getting some figures from council for quite a few years now, but I'd certainly like to see that we would be able to release those figures without having freedom of information requests and all the rest coming out. How many can we do? Again, I've no idea. You know, we need to do as much as we can given budgets, and some of that is going to be in the schemes that the national government will bring forward. I don't think we've got the money to be able to retrofit huge numbers of houses unless we can get some grants, and I think legislation will be coming through on that from central government. It has to be done if we want to be carbon neutral. You're absolutely right. We have to somehow reduce the amount of energy we use, as well as change the type of energy we use in those homes. And of course, it does give that benefit, as you say, the skills and the cost reduction for the homeowners as well. So it's all a great, you know, a really good thing. Very, very keen to do as many as possible. We'll do the sums when we get in there, and we can have a look and we can see what money's available. But at the moment, I can't give you sort of absolute answers on that you would like, because I just don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. And now we will go to Marvin.
On our delivery, this is a question that came up the other day. So I will say over the last 4 years, it's spent 40 to 50 million pounds retrofitting homes, and that is quite a broad base of interventions. It means sometimes the cladding, putting air source heats in. We've put cladding on the outside of blocks as well. That's taken in lots of homes during the process as well. We've had double glazing old windows replaced. There's a whole a raft of of efforts. The other thing just to bear in mind here is that that housing revenue account that we need to draw on to build homes is the same account that we use to upgrade our homes. So one of the dilemmas we face as a local authority is those two things are in tension. We can build new homes to fantastic environmental standards, and we've done that with ground source heat in Alderman's Moor, at Jessop's Way, solar panels on the roof, and new homes have fantastic opportunities. The real challenge is the old stock, where beyond just retrofitting for increased sustainability as well, the houses are full into state repair. When we think about the tower blocks in Barton Hill, they're a massive challenge to us, left rot from the 60s. That all makes demands on our HRA, which impacts on the ability to deliver homes. And just now we talked about council housing, because it's not that the housing delivery is those numbers. Council houses are part of a mix in a wider network of affordable. Our point at the moment is, in the lead up to COP, we're pressing government to give us a Green New Deal, which means front-loading investment in green infrastructure. That means releasing the billions of pounds worth of money that that are required to decarbonise our systems, energy, waste, and housing as well. So actually, it's going to depend on the ability for us to get that money out of government for those grants to retrofit our existing housing stock. But at the moment, the way things financially stand, we're looking at it would be a minimum of 500 a year.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we go to Nicholas.
Thanks. We've talked so far about the council paying to do retrofits, but actually we've established that most of the homes in Bristol are owner occupied, and there are people who are willing to invest their own money in energy efficiency, because actually it pays for itself. The whole point is that if you insulate your house, you don't need to burn as much gas, fossil fuel, money in heating it warm. And so climate change doesn't really care whether the emissions come from an owner-occupied boiler or from a rented boiler. So one of the big wins that doesn't have a long-term capital cost on the council or the government is to support homeowners to insulate their own homes. And what we're proposing to Liberal Democrats is a green bond to fund those homes, a loan that is paid back later when those savings are realised. So that's happened previously at national level. It was abolished by the the current Conservative government. And unfortunately, the current investment announced last year has also been abolished unspent. And so there is a way to support people to make the right choices and do the right thing for their own homes. It would help very much if the council could lead on navigating for those in historic buildings how to balance environmental efficiency with heritage conservation by issuing guidance that would say, are you allowed double glazing in these places? Does it have to be single glazing? What can you do to break the regulatory cycle that some people find themselves in when they're trying to do the right thing? So certainly the council has got a role in upgrading its own council housing stock, but I think that there's also a low-cost opportunity to support other people who want to invest in sustainability.
Thank you. And now please to Sandy.
Thanks. Yes. So part of our plan, I mean, I would say that the Greens are the party that led in the declaration of the climate emergency. We're really the party who takes it seriously. So we do have a plan. There is a study put together by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, which is a 10-year plan to retrofit certainly all the council homes in Bristol. It's a 10-year plan creating 10,000 jobs. There's two contracts. One is the retrofitting and one is the training. You know, to create that many people or that many trained people will take time. So that's working with City of Bristol College and others to train up ideally young and unemployed people to do the retrofitting. So there is a plan there. Absolutely agree with Alistair. We need to be transparent in all things, not just retrofitting and how many retrofits we're doing. I want to be run an open council. I would have a cross-party cabinet which would aid that, so every party that's on the council would be represented. Then, but in terms of retrofitting all the houses in the city, that is a real challenge that only central government can put the funding in to kickstart that with private landlords. One of the things we can do, but I'm not 100% sure if it's the right thing to do under the licensing. Certainly we would want all licensed landlords to reach Energy C pretty soon, and potentially sort of AA by the end of the decade. My only reservation around that is then how we make sure that cost isn't passed on to the renter, and that's something we need to work on. So but there is a way of doing that we're pushing landlords to improve their insulation, the types of boilers they have. But my experience of this stuff is when you allow people the time to plan, they'll do it over a 10-year period. Then they will do it. Boilers, somebody's not going to replace their boiler tomorrow if they just put it in last year, but a boiler has a 10-year cycle. And if you know that by the end of the decade, you're going to need to have a AA standard, you will save, you will put the money aside and retrofit your home or put in a new boiler over time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy. And we'll go back to Arif for his response.
Yeah, thanks to all the candidates. Yeah, encouraged by Sandy. It's good that there's a clear plan in place. However, it was only Marvin actually mentioned a figure, which was a minimum of 500 a year, which was clearly well down on the 7,000. Thank you. I think Nicholas's point about the green bond was very interesting, and it could be a solution for the private sector. For ACORN members, retrofitting is about more than just environment and climate. It's also an opportunity to rebuild in the communities that have been hit hardest by council cuts, job losses and the pandemic. So I welcome the candidates who are committing to retrofitting and training skilled workers in our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the questions from our panelists. And now I will hand over to Jennifer Little from the Bristol Fair Renting campaign, who has the most popular questions as voted for by you. And she will ask the candidates these now.
Hi, so the first question is coming from Kerry, and she's asking, if people can't afford to rent a property and are excluded from getting a mortgage because they have no capital, how is building affordable housing going to help?
Marvin?
Well, going back to the point made earlier about demand, the housing crisis is more than about demand and supply, but demand and supply is part of it. This is about making sure that legislation catches up with where the housing market has got to. My sister lives in Zurich, they rent, they have lots of rights, they can't be turfed out, the rent is limited and so forth. But building affordable homes obviously adds supply, so we can move people in. But that is, is part of our mix. It's the way in. People unable to afford to rent on the private market, unable to buy, excluded, have a greater chance of moving into an affordable home. And the more affordable homes we have, and I do have to talk about not just council homes, but those brought forward by housing associations and schemes such as the Z-Pod schemes we've done with Bristol Housing Festival. Again, just as a small example, those are young people just coming out of very challenging circumstances who now have carbon neutral homes in St George's Park, and they're living in a community with placemakers with the YMCA there. Those people would be amongst the highest risk of ending up on our streets. So bringing these kind of schemes.
Thank you, Marvin. Sorry,
okay.
I stopped you there. Right. Just a minute each for these, unfortunately. I'll hand over now to Nicholas, please.
Yeah, I think it's very similar answer. That the point is, if commercial rents and mortgages are out of reach, then a lower rent is required, and that lower rent is provided by a social rent, an affordable rent, whichever one of the various names we've come up with now, that are things which are like council housing but not quite it. Then that rent is lower and should be within the grasp of housing benefit. Certainly it would be if that rate was localised.
Thank you. And Alistair.
Yeah, I have to agree with what has been said. I mean, there's no easy answer when you don't have any capital and you are on a low salary or you're on benefits. Really your only option is renting at that point. What we've got to do is try and get those people into perhaps better jobs, or help them to save something. I think that the government scheme looking at 5% deposit mortgages and guaranteeing those, trying to get people into the housing market or shared ownership and so on, all those can help, but that would be in the future. So I can't give any more solutions to that. It's hopefully the social housing will take some of the strain as we go forward and we start to build more council and social housing.
Thank you very much. And Sandy.
Yeah, much of what's been said already. Look, I don't think we can sugarcoat this. As I've said before, we're suffering from a generation of underinvestment in housing, and it's not something that's we can resolve tomorrow, next year, even probably, unfortunately, I hate to say it, even this decade. And that's the reality of it. So affordable housing helps a bit, social housing helps a bit, council housing helps a bit. I do pay tribute to the innovation that's happened in this administration. The Z-Pods were a great idea, and there's some other really good innovative ways of squeezing cheap and affordable housing into existing communities. So all of those things will help, but it's going to take a long time before we're back on an even keel where everybody can afford to rent a reasonable home and live their life in the way that they want to, which is as it should be, but it's going to take time.
Thank you, Sandy. And back to Jennifer for the next question, please.
Okay, next question. How would the candidates ensure that the cost of any compulsory improvements landlords are required to make will not be passed on to the tenants?
Nicholas, please.
That is a difficult question. I think it may well be impossible. If the landlords are required to improve their properties, so they have to spend money on it, then they may choose to pass on that cost if they think that the property is worth more as a result of it. That is a market. Of course, they shouldn't be doing that mid-contract. They wouldn't be allowed to. And one of the ways of easing that out would be to have longer contracts. We think that 3-year contracts should be more common, so that people have got more security of tenure and they know what they're going to be paying for a longer time period. But I think ultimately, if there is an investment in the home and it becomes a better home for it, then the landlord might well want to charge more money. Having more homes available means that is there's less of a supply and demand effect on that.
Thank you. And to Alistair, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a legal issue in the end, and I think that if if the contracts are for 6 or 12 months, I think that, and I would agree with Nicholas there that I would like to see some longer contracts. I mean, my son who lived in Bristol was every 12 months there was a new place to move to, and so on, and of course at that point the landlords can then inflate the rents. So I would like to see longer contracts in place to try and ameliorate that. But it's not something I think we can do with legislation as it is at the moment.
Thank you, Alistair. And now to Sandy.
Yeah, thank you. It is a difficult thing to do. I think the licensing scheme can help with that. That means that landlords can't put up their rents unreasonably, and there's recourse to that. What we want to head for is that European style renting system where the home is yours, and if you're renting, that it is your home and you can't be kicked out of it as long as you continue to pay the rent and look after it. That's where we want to get to. But it's going to take time, and we will lobby hard. We'll for investment, for the repeal of the various bits of legislation that allow landlords to abuse their position. But it is just going to take time.
Thank you. And now to Marvin.
Yeah, this is part of our frustration with national government and its failure to listen to us, to give us the legal backing we need to be able to take action. So first off, I'll say this is part of what we call a just transition. There are some interventions that we must take to make sure that the price the planet pays for us meeting the needs of our population is not too high, right? So we don't kill the planet. The problem is that the danger is that the disproportionate weighting of that price is paid by the most vulnerable people on the planet in the first instance. So we have to retrofit our homes because it's one of the biggest sources of carbon for us, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't then fall on the shoulders of people least able to pay for it. I actually think there's a little bit of an opportunity here, and we'll see what happens in COP26. Prime Minister came out this week making a load of big statements, hasn't talked to any of the cities about how it's going to get done. But one of the things that we'll be doing with core cities is saying, okay, well, you've made these targets. This is how you meet them. One of the ways to meet them is by retrofitting homes. This is what that program looks like. And I actually talked with core cities yesterday about coming up with a joint commitment to government on that front. But in that commitment to making sure our homes can be retrofit, we have to do it in a way that, one, we're not just giving away cheap subsidies to private landlords, but again, doesn't fall on the shoulders of renters in there. So it's what a friend says, occupy the rhetoric. So that's the effort that's underway right now in the lead up to COP.
Thank you very much. And now back to Jen for the third question.
Artspace are asking, would you support securing buildings to be taken on by community land trusts? For example, closing department stores like Debenhams, instead of selling building stock to developers whose main objective is profit and hand over existing housing stock on long-term leases to CLTs at peppercorn rents.
Thank you. First, Sandy.
Yes, thank you. This is something I do in my day job. We've taken over a number of old buildings, an old fire station in the middle of Bristol, a number of old youth clubs that we use to deliver our services as Creative Youth Network, and it absolutely can work. It's something that can bring in money, that subsidises services. It acts as the anchor and a centre for many of those communities and for young people. So yes, it is absolutely something that we can do. What I would want to, I think there's, my knowledge of it, my expertise of it says that there are some buildings that are really good. What we don't want to do is for the council to just pass over the sort of duds that need a whole load of work doing on them. I've had councils, not Bristol I have to say, but other councils trying to sort of force kind of dud buildings with broken roofs and boilers that need fixing. So it needs to come with a dowry, if you like, for want of a better word. But also they need to be embedded in their communities. And I think what I would want to see is a really good community anchor organisation with a building in every community. We see places like Barton Hill Settlement, Southmead Development Trust, that have really are at the heart of their communities, and because they have a building there, they're often able to provide new services, bring money in, bring communities together, and really help those communities to thrive. So yes, it's absolutely something that I would like to do. We need to do it intelligently, pick the right buildings for the right places, and not just have a sort of blanket, yes, we'll give away all of our buildings, but if we get it right, it can really strengthen communities, give space for artists, and all sorts. So I'm really in favour of that, and I've done it.
Thank you very much. And now to Nicholas, please.
Thanks. Jen, could you just clarify, are the community land trusts to use the buildings for housing? That's what I thought I heard, but Sandy's answer made me think it may not be.
Sorry, maybe I misread the question.
Jen?
Sorry, do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
It's, would you support securing buildings to be taken on by community land trusts, such as Debenhams, instead of selling building stock to developers whose main objective is profit, and hand over existing housing stock on long-term leases to CLTs at peppercorn rents? Art Space has just added, it is for housing with community spaces on GFs.
Okay, right. It actually doesn't make that much difference to my answer, which is that Liberal Democrats care more about results than process. And so if houses are to be delivered by the council, by registered social landlords, or private sector or community land trust, then that is still delivering housing and it's in the public interest. And so I think that if there's proper accountability to it, then there's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't support community land trusts to develop housing, because it'll give us the same outcome, but it might well be a better and more inclusive process. So it sounds like a good idea to me if it performs better than all of the other options available to us.
Thank you. Marvin, please.
Yes, we would. Not talking specifically about Debenhams, but yes, we would. And I mean, you've seen just this week, Ambition Large Western have just got planning permission for 26 homes, really community-led, taking on a piece of land down there. We have a big development in Southmead with Southmead Development Trust as well, community-led. We've overseen a series of community asset transfers for Peppercorn Rent when we can see the social value, and obviously it's city assets, so we have to make sure that it's financially watertight, but we do. And there are new opportunities coming through, both with self-build, but particularly with the Bristol Housing Festival and off-site manufacture, which opens up a whole collection of opportunities. I mean, we talked about Z-Pods, but there's opportunities with schemes such as Launchpad as well. A partnership between United, Bristol Housing Festival, Bristol University, and ourselves as well, for young people at risk of homelessness and students as well. So really proactively building community. But there's a couple of things I'll say. One is the whole city centre and our high streets has to be revamped. And we're looking at that now. We've got too much retail space in the city as part of the restructuring of the economy, and our city we're replanning, and that will include a lot more residential in those spaces. And we are constantly fending off developers who just want to come to the city and make money without any regard to the common good. So that's an ongoing battle for us. Goes back to that question of capacity of our legal team and our planners to be able to fend these people off, and how dangerous that loss of backroom capacity is in our efforts to make sure the city is for Bristol and not for speculators.
Thank you very much, Marvin. And finally to Alistair, please.
Yeah, I certainly, you know, community land trusts and other community organisations. I agree with the other speakers. You know, that they've got to be well run. They've got to show that they have the capability and that you know, they can deliver the quality and what's required. But you know, I would see no barriers to that. You know, given the sites or buildings that become available. So yeah, and I mean, I'd certainly reflect what Marvin says as well. You know, we do need good ethical developers who are going to develop parts of our city. So, you know, there could be a whole mix there of people working together and working with the community and with some of these trusts, perhaps, you know, as sort of hybrid organization, joint efforts and so on. So yeah, very, very keen to get the community involved where it can be.
Thank you. Jen, do you have any more questions or is that it?
Let's have.
I think that's it. 3 questions.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that brings us to a close of the Mayoral Assembly this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for attending and special thanks to our mayoral candidates and to Nicholas for stepping in. I hope you've enjoyed listening to all of the answers given this evening. I would just wanted to ask if the Bristol Fair Rent campaign had one last ask.
Yes,
No.
sorry. Hello, it's Daisy here. I've just posted into the chat box our fair renting manifesto. So if anyone hasn't already signed this, please do. It's for all Bristol residents, not just renters. We've got, as Owen said, nearly 1,000 have signed it already. And yeah, we're building momentum across the city for the demands that the speakers have raised tonight. So yeah, please do sign it and share it. Thank you very much.
And do Bristol ACORN have one last ask? I'll do it. Please join ACORN. We are a community union based in Bristol and we support lots of campaigns and lots of issues that the communities of Bristol need help with or guidance, and we campaign for things that really matter to Bristol's residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for all your time.
Bye.